everyone, it's Louise from Forever Impressions. What I thought I would do today is show you the process of how I make my coasters. As a lot of you know who follow my work, I make lots of products from my artwork, which include things like cards, bookmarks, notebooks, and I thought I would show you the process of how I make my coasters. This here is a finished coaster. So what I thought I would do is show you the process of how I get from all the different pieces that I put together and how I seal my coasters with my new blue tip artwork. So my coasters are 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. So what I order is an MDF coaster blank. So this is just MDF, it's not finished or anything like that. Obviously it's finished on the edges, but there's no sort of sealant or anything on that. And then I also purchase cork backing, which goes onto the coaster. But obviously the cork backing is square and the coaster is already kind of rounded off on the edges. So that's a process that takes a little bit of time, is adhering it to the MDF and then having to trim around it. So I will show you that as well, how I do that. So I use Publisher for most of my products that I make, and here you can see I have the blue tip artwork all set up. So what I tend to do is take a scanned image of my artwork, and then I use a program called Be Funky, which is a photo editing kind of application. It is a small fee a year. I think it's something like £25 a year, which is actually relatively cheap for a photo editing app, which I use on my phone, and you can also use it on the laptop also. So I use that to remove the backdrop, which does actually a very good job. You can use things like Photoshop, but I find Be Funky is adequate for my needs right now. So I remove the background of my artwork and then I import it into Publisher, depending on what item I'm making. So I know that with my coasters they are 10 centimeters, so I would then import the picture at that size, and over in the corner here I've set it to that size, so when it's printed it will come out pretty much the same size as the coaster blank here. So here is the artwork printed out, and the paper that I use for this is called Koala double-sided matte inkjet photo paper, and it is 230 GSM in weight. I also use this for my cards also, but I find that this works really well on the coasters. So you can see I've printed it out, and the actual outer edge of the artwork is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And the blue tip has actually come out really well. You can probably see there that how the Be Funky app has actually really removed the background really well on this piece of art. Sometimes you may have to kind of tweak it a little, but this one actually didn't need any tweaking at all once it was done. I do obviously change the colour tones a little bit, because you do need to do that. You never get the exact replica from your artwork, it's very difficult to, but I really like how the colours have come out on this paper. So once I've printed the artwork out, and normally I will make quite a few of these in one go, I tend to cut all of them out ready, so we will go ahead and do that now. Doesn't have to be exact, because you'll see why shortly when I adhere it to the coaster. There we are, so that's just two done for now. So once all my artwork is cut out, I will then begin the process of sorting the actual coaster out. So I'll show you how I do that. This is a sticky surface, which is really handy, so no glue is needed. And then we adhere it to one side of the MDF coaster. Again, we don't need to be too precise, but we obviously want it as fairly straight as possible. So once that's adhered, you can see that obviously there are the edges showing, and there's a little bit there, but we get rid of that, and I'll show you how I do that. So to trim off the edges of the cork backing, I use a very sharp X-Acto knife, and I'll work my way around the coaster. It's really important that this knife is sharp, because if it's not sharp it will start to tag the cork and then it looks a little bit rough. So as you can see, it's kind of taken off all around the edges there, and I will clean that up shortly and you'll see how I do that. So you're probably all wondering, how does she get the artwork onto the coaster? So what I do with that is I use Pritt Stick, and I found that I've used a lot of other glues like this, but this glue is the best for this because it adheres the paper to the MDF best. Okay, so what I will do then, once I have put all the corks on, is then we will place all of the artwork onto the coasters. Again, the artwork is square and the edges are rounded, but I will show you how we get around that. But we need to adhere the print to the coaster first and foremost. We now need to leave the coasters dry for a fairly good time, because we want the glue to be set. Because if we now try and start trimming around here before it's dried, it will start to tag at the paper no matter how sharp your knife is. So I would probably now leave these for a good few hours before I would do the next step. But what I tend to do is make all of these in one go, so I'll have a lot sort of in a production line as such. So what I will do is be back and show you the next process of how I do it. Okay, so this set of coasters now have dried for a good couple of hours, and what I will do now is trim the paper, and then I'll show you the process of how I then seal the artwork. So again, a very sharp knife. I have lots of these blades, and I probably change them every sort of 8 coasters or so, because you will start to know when your blade is starting to become blunt, and you need it to be super sharp to do this, and you do need this kind of blade. So here we go. So I tend to do the straight edges first, if there's any exposed along the edge, which generally there will be. So I've done all those on the edge, and then once I've done the edge ones, I tend to then go around the corner. Now, you haven't got to be too precise, because you'll see why in a moment. So I've trimmed off the excess around the edge. A little bit there still. There we go. So at the moment, this does look quite unfinished, but it is adhered really well with the glue around the edge for now. So the way that I would tidy this up to give it sort of more of a edge like this is I use sandpaper. Now this is quite a rough grit. It's probably a little bit rougher than I would normally use, but I have been using this on my coasters of late. And what we do is we kind of go around the edge to give it more of a finish. So I'll show you what I mean, if you guys can see this. So it's kind of a downward motion, moving away from the coaster, not upwards, downwards, away from the coaster. And because the glue has set really well, you'll start to see that it kind of finishes the edge off. So work my way all the way around, and again I would do this in process. So once I've glued all of my pictures down to all of the coasters, then I would then cut all my coasters depending on what run I'm doing, and then I would do this process after. So there's quite a few processes to making them. It does get a bit dusty and messy. So I've kind of just roughly gone around this one, and what I tend to do then is I have a look at the edges because some bits of the glue might still be showing. So I tend to just run it softly along the edge. Also, I want the cork to have a nice edge finish to it as well, so that's where I start to go around on that. So it's just really getting rid of any glue bits that we see, like so, and tidying up the corner of the cork. I wouldn't go too roughly on the cork because you don't want it to start breaking away. Just realised I've done a lot of that off camera, so I do apologise. So it can be quite messy, but once you get in a run of doing it, I've now I do speed up quite a bit more. So once I've gone around and finished the edge of the coaster, like so, I then get a bone folder, and this process probably doesn't necessarily need to happen, but I just do it because I'm just a bit picky and I like it to look good. So I just run the bone folder around the edge of my coaster, just so I know that it's all sealed off nicely. Okay, so that's what I would do to finish the paper edge, and now I will show you how I seal and what I seal my coasters with. Okay, so sealing my coasters, I did a lot of research on what would be the best way to seal them, because obviously I wanted them to be heat proof, and I wanted them to be waterproof, and I also wanted them to be sort of chemical resistant, i.e. being wiped over with like a antibacterial wipe or something like that. So I went to YouTube to have a look, and a lot of people use things like Mod Podge on top of their coasters, which is fine, but something I experimented with like what we would call a decoupage type glue, is that number one, you get lots of streaks, which isn't great and doesn't look particularly good. And also when you put a hot drink on the coaster, it tends to stick to the coaster, which is really annoying. So I experimented with that, and I didn't like the finish, and I didn't like the fact that it possibly might not have been heat proof. It probably would have been waterproof, but not heat proof. So I did a lot of research, and I found a YouTube channel where a lady makes coasters, decoupage coasters, and she did a lot of experimentation and found a type of wood glue that actually worked really well to seal a coaster. So I can't take the credit for this. This is something that I've researched and found and trialed myself and found it works really well. And I'll leave a link to the channel down below in the comments. I'll try and pronounce it correctly, but I think she is called Evita Zidina. But I will, like I say, tag her and put her in my comments below. So the glue, or the varnish, should I say, that is used is Polyvine, and the specific one is the heavy duty wood varnish. Now it sounds bizarre, why am I using wood varnish on paper? And my first instinct was that was not going to work, because I felt it was either going to make the ink run, or it was going to make the paper buckle. So although I watched the video of her doing it, I was a little bit apprehensive trying it, but I thought, let's give it a go. So this one is obviously ultra tough, and the reason why this one is recommended as well, it's chemical resistant, so alcohol and cleaning products. So if you're to use any of those on the coasters, it's meant to be resistant to that. Another thing as well, it's good for high sort of wear, so you would use this on something that would get a lot of wear and tear, and obviously a coaster gets a lot of wear and tear. Another thing with this one as well, it is actually heat resistant, so they actually claim it's highly heat resistant varnish. It is also water resistant, which is what we would want with a coaster. It is very fast drying, so with this I put at least 5 coats onto the coasters, but it dries within an hour, so I can do a big run of coasters and basically every hour or so keep adding coats to harden it and give that extra sort of protection. The great thing with this, and one thing that I absolutely love about this varnish, is it dries flat. So when they say dead flat finish, that is what you are getting. So the difference between one that hasn't been varnished yet and one that has, you wouldn't know the difference at all. Obviously you would if you poured water on it, but the difference is not noticeable. There are no streaks or lines at all on the coaster. So when I tried this, I did obviously experiment first before I went ahead and made my coasters with it, and I put hot drinks on it. It doesn't stick to the coaster at all. And I also run it under a tap, which you wouldn't normally do, but I ran it under a flowing tap, and it was completely water repellent. Wiped it off, and the edges and everything stayed intact. So I know that it is pretty good. So that is what I will be sealing this with. So I just use a brush like this. It's a soft bristle brush. This is quite a big container, but you do go through quite a bit of it, and obviously I don't want to be wasting varnish. So what I tend to do is I do wait until I have a big run to do, purely because it's just having to clean the brush all the time. So what I tend to do is, and you don't need a lot of it each time, is I take the lid off and I pour just a little bit in. I don't pour too much into the lid. And I make sure that my coaster is completely dust free, or as dust free as possible. and my brush, and then we dip it in. And the coat one, really, I don't want it to be too thick, but we just put it over the top of it. And at the moment on coat one, I'm just making sure that the entire surface is covered with the varnish. It will look at the moment like there's lots of streaks on it. There's bits of, but there is, they will disappear. They will disappear. So that's coat one done. So then I will leave that to dry, and after an hour I will come back and do another coat. When I do the second coat, I will obviously go over the top again, but then I start to work my way around the edge as well. So I make sure that the edges are done and the top is done. Leave that to dry. Third coat, exactly the same again, across the top and around the edges, and I do 5 coats in total. So this coaster is a finished coaster that I have, and it's obviously had 5 coats of the Polyvine heavy duty wood varnish on it. And I've got a cup of hot water. I know I can't prove that, but trust me, it's boiling hot water on there, and I've had it sat on there for a few minutes or so. I just wanted to show you guys that it doesn't stick. So when I lift the mug up, we get no stickiness like you would from something like Mod Podge or a decoupage type glue. Yes, it will seal the coaster, but it will, your hot drinks will stick to the coaster. So that's one thing that I love about it. It doesn't stick to the coaster. Number 2, you can take something like an antibacterial wipe over it, and nothing happens. It doesn't buckle. We don't get any sort of, you know, anything happening to the paper. It just starts to dry, and when it dries, it looks like it did before. So it's quite good in that respect. And also what I'm going to do is a little bit weird this, but I'm just going to put some, right, so I've got some coffee here. I've just dabbed a bit of coffee on there. So we would normally, sometimes you might get a spillage of coffee or something like that, so we can just wipe it away. Completely wiped away. Nothing happens to the edge. Look, it's all still sealed because I've gone around the edge with the varnish, and that there's nothing happening to the paper. It's not buckling, it's not, it's just as it was. So just wipe it off and leave it dry, and it will be as it was before. And that is why I love using this product on these coasters. It is a lot of hard work, so yes, I could get these printed by sublimation, by a company, but I would be paying a lot more at the present moment to do that. And what I love about doing this is that what you are buying is a completely handmade product from start to finish by myself. So I hope you've enjoyed this little insight video to my coaster making and my processes, and I hope, you know, it might help some people in the process of making their own coasters too. Bye bye.